Welcome once again to Zen Minded Men. We're your host. I'm Sensei Art Gulley Jr.
Good morning. I'm your co-host, Sensei Vincent Ellis. And this week, again, just going down the list of the virtues of Bushido, our topic for this week is courage. And just a really quick Google search for how courage is defined. This is a very loose definition, but the ability to do something that frightens you or strength in the face of pain or grief. So, again, that's a very general description of what courage is. And this month is National Anti-Bullying Month. So, good opportunity to speak on courage. And I'm actually not at home this week. I am here at this meeting. You and I are doing this. I am in North Dakota on an Air Force base visiting my daughter. So big shout out to all the courageous men and women in our armed forces. Takes a lot of courage to do what they do each and every day. Took a lot of courage to sign up. Takes a lot of courage to man your post. So very appreciative to those. And as martial artists, we owe a lot to our veteran community. Without them traveling abroad, studying the arts in those foreign countries and bringing it back, we would be decades from where we are today. Those early World War II veterans, Korean War veterans, Vietnam War era veterans allowed us to learn what we have today. So very, very thankful to all of our veterans.
Most definitely. And as with me and Sensei Ellis always talk about our veterans, we really want anyone listening, please support your veterans, regardless of what your politics are, what your opinion are of our leadership, what your opinion are of the conflicts that we're facing around the world. Please support our veterans, because those men and women had the courage to, as Sensei Ellis said, sign up, put on the uniform. And basically, like I said last week, they stand on the wall and they say nothing's going to hurt us tonight. And let's please just support our veterans, not only those abroad, but those who are home struggling with different, maladies because of their time overseas, different injuries, whether they're physical or psychological. Let's show them our support. If you can, support your local veterans causes. If you know a veteran, make sure they're okay. Just show them that we give a damn. Okay, even though the current theme may seem different, we give a damn about our veterans.
Absolutely.
So, Sensei, what do you think? I love that it's National Bullying Month, and because one of the reasons a lot of young folks come to the dojo is their children. We hear that story time and time again. My daughter is being picked on, or he has to walk to school and he's going to get picked on by this, or in school there's going on, and there's a lot of push to learn a self-defense. But the thing is, I think with karate, not only when you come into the dojo, first of all, it takes courage to step into the dojo. It can be very intimidating to walk into a place where people are yelling and you see people being flipped and, they're shouting because there's loud kiosks. It can be very intimidating, especially for the younger people, but also for the older people who feel that maybe they missed their opportunity to take karate. I think anyone who starts anything, whether it's martial arts or music or a new job, takes courage. It takes a certain amount of effort to motivate yourself. And in the dojo, we talk about courage in terms of how to face down your opponents or how to face down any situation. But it's also, we talk about courage of how to just have the courage to better yourself, have the courage to step into another area of life that maybe you weren't aware of. If you want to learn a new lesson, have the courage to ask someone to teach you. If you want to learn how to drive, have the courage to ask someone to teach you. If you don't know something, have the courage to ask someone. That takes a lot of courage. Have the courage to admit to yourself that you need help. Takes a lot of courage. It's hard to admit to yourself, I need help with this. I need to change. And we want to explore those aspects today. Sensei, what are some of the virtues of courage that you told out at your school with you owning and running your own school? How do you approach it?
Well, first and foremost, we read the definition, at the beginning here, and personally, like my definition of courage, and it's not the absence of fear. I think a lot of people think courage is just some sort of unnatural bravery where nothing scares you, and that is completely false. Um, Everybody has fears and anxieties, and those are perfectly natural. Courage is doing what needs to be done in spite of that. You have to, um, you can't let courage, or I'm sorry, you can't let fears and anxiety be something that paralyzes you. So in my dojo in particular, one of the things that I, you know, challenge my students on all the time is always moving forward. Always moving forward. There's no such thing as static. If you're not trying to advance, then you're moving backwards, because there's nothing in the world that is static, and that takes courage. Um, if you just cover up and try to absorb the beating, that is not courageous. That is just survival. Um, I really want to drive home that mental and spiritual attribute of pushing past and pushing beyond. I really like the fact that you brought up, you know, even coming to the dojo, that first step, how much courage that takes. It's for a lot of modern martial arts students, I'll say that the children in particular, our young kids, there's a lot of young kids that are just simply brought to the dojo by their parents. So it's almost, they have a want to perhaps, but I don't think they really understand what they're getting into as much as our adult students. So for
Hmm.
myself, for example, I was 20 years old when I started my martial arts journey, and it was very intimidating. You are correct. My initial introduction to martial arts wasn't near as bad because I was training with people that I knew. So my first 6 months of training was with family. Somebody that I had known better than half my life at the time. So it was relatively comfortable. Uh, it wasn't, the training wasn't comfortable. The training was painful, but uh, honestly, in that first 6 months, I don't think I ever left a class that I wasn't bleeding. But that's okay. Sometimes the best lessons are the hard lessons. But um, when I first walked into the Southfield dojo and met Master Adams, um, that was a very interesting, experience, and it did, it took some courage to number one, just to go, and then to stay. It was really more or less courageous, because it as we've talked about in the past, there was a lot of people there. I started training kind of like you. My introduction at Southfield Dojo, I was working second shift, so I trained in the daytime, so there wasn't as many people there in the day, but the ones that were there, they were very talented, very, very talented. But just that first step, I know there's a lot of adults out there who want to train, but think that it's beyond them, maybe physically, but there's something there for everybody. There's something there for everybody. And I tell my kids the same thing, or all my students in the dojo. I have I have some adult students that have some physical issues, kind of like I have one female student in particular that has a debilitating hip injury. So she's been fighting with this since she was like 12 years old. So her mobility is limited. But now here's a woman that, she trained as a child, made it to a certain level, and then got injured. And that was the beginning of this thing that she's dealing with now. And she took a 20-year hiatus from, martial arts training, and then she was an Ishiner student as a child. And so when she found my dojo, you know, teaching Ishiner, she decided to come and try it. And she does very well. You know, she performs her kata very well. She's active in our sparring classes. Um, she's even grappling a little bit, but you know, I commend the courage for her to do those things. It's been pretty amazing because she's had to overcome a lot, you know, to do that.
That is something. I
Yeah.
remember for me, my first introduction to martial arts, as always, everyone's first introduction was Bruce Lee and the Kung Fu
Oh yeah.
Classic. But my first physical introduction was from a guy that beat me up actually when I was about I guess I was around 12 years old, you know, and neighbors down the street, it was like 6 or 7 brothers, and they were into everything. But the youngest one, he was probably maybe about 9 or 10. Remember one day he threw a rock at me and he hit me. And so I took the rock and threw it back. And a few minutes later, here comes 4 or 5 of his brothers with cousins. And one of his brothers, his name was John. He comes up to me and he's like, you know, why are you picking with my little brother? I'm like, I wasn't messing with your little brother. I wasn't. He threw a rock at me, he hit me. So I threw the rock back. And right when I was talking, he just hauled off and just clocked me right upside the head. And I kind of like jerked back and I looked at him and I looked at him and his brother next to him and his other brother and whoever these other people were. And I literally just put my head here and turned my head and just walked back home. I didn't say anything. I felt horrible because I felt just like the biggest coward. But I knew, I said, you know what, I'm about to get killed out here. And I felt like, you know, I felt horrible. And a couple of days later, I saw them and I'm walking up the street and I saw them. So I said, okay, now I got to get home. I go to cross the street and he calls out, John, he's like, Art, come here. And he calls out, he says, look, man, the other day, you know, that was kind of wrong what I did, you know, but I got to tell you, I hit you as hard as I could and you barely moved, man. So, you know, I'm gonna teach you something if you want to learn some stuff. So he started showing me push-ups and different punches, and he's the one that got me started with the nunchucks. And he could do things with these nunchucks. And from there, I just wanted to learn. You know, of course, I talked to my mom, and we weren't financially able at the time, so I couldn't learn formally. And then one of my my aunt married my uncle, one of his sons from a previous marriage, he was taking Taekwondo. So he started teaching me a little bit. And it went on like that for years. He would show me stuff and I would do kicks and nothing formal. When I finally got in my 20s and I started working at the home weatherization, and I owe all of my what I am today, I owe a lot of that to my good friend and coworker Kenneth Luke. And we were talking about martial arts, and he was saying this, and he was telling me, yeah, you got to go to Detroit Budokan, home of the Warriors, Grandmaster Willie Adams, well, his master Adams, Willie Adams then, well, Master Willie Adams, you got to train. And I'm like, well, you know, I've been doing Taekwondo, and so I'm showing him my stuff, and he's stepping in and hitting, he's doing this, and I'm like, wow, how are you moving that way? He says, look, you got to come to Detroit Budokan down on Dexter Davis. So I said, okay, I screwed up the nerve to say, okay, now I'm an adult. There's no excuse if I want to train. Because I had tried to go to a Taekwondo school. And back then, Grandmaster Kim, before he was killed in that accident, I met with him and he told me this crazy price. And I said, well, that's a little more. And he basically said, well, okay, if you can't pay, then get out. Or you can come sweep the dojo and I'll teach you. And I'm like, you know, okay, fine. And it was probably a good thing because I ended up in a better system, in my opinion. So Luke took me to Dexter Davison, and Grandmaster Adams was there. Well, it's hard to not call him that because I'm so used to calling him that. And I met him, and the one thing when I walked into this dojo, I mean, you know, it's just really run down and it smelled, and I'm like, are you kidding me? But everybody on the mat was drenched in sweat and they were just working and they were fighting, doing like the 1-2 step, like you plunge, I block. And I was just like, wow. So Master Adams, he took me into a little small, he had a little office off the main mat. And one thing I always remember is how calm he seemed. This was like the calmest, you know, and then when he looked at you, he just looked at you. And I told him, I said, you know, I want to take karate. I've always been interested and I'm very clumsy and this and that. And he just listened. He says, well, I can tell you now, it doesn't matter. You can walk up a flight of stairs. You can do a Shinru, and more than happy to have you train here. This is a good place to be. So he told me what the price was. I signed up, and the rest was history. My first class, that was on like a Thursday. My first class was a Saturday. That's when Sensei Lambert, he was actually my very first Ishinru teacher because Master Woods was off that day. And Sensei Carl Lambert, and just this big bear of a man that moved with the grace of a ballerina. He's passed on now. But I just started, and I realized that, okay, this is a place to be. And from that first training, I started getting a confidence like, okay, I'm actually doing something I want to do because I have the courage to show my little skills to a friend. And because he told me your skills is pathetic, I had the courage to move forward. I first of all had to accept that. Then I had to have the courage to say, okay, is it time? Is nothing holding me back? I can learn now. And I think everyone who walks in the dojo feels that at some point. The little kids, as you say, a lot of times they're pushed into the karate. A lot of times it's not even because the parents want self-defense. The parents need a babysitter, and the dojos are readily available, and they're kind of not that expensive a lot. And you have a
Yeah,
lot of
compared to
adults come in,
childcare, you're right.
yeah. And then but then the child develops that attachment to the dojo. But my whole thing, I'm always floored by, I know you remember Sensei Tom Schutte. This man was in a wheelchair. And when the first time when I started going to Southfield, and I'm looking at him, he's a black belt, and I'm not sure of what the illness he had, but he was very kind of debilitated. But he was in this wheelchair, and he would do his katas and whip around, and he would do self-defense. It was amazing. And I would talk with him, and he would just say, yeah, he was never one, he would never bring up the fact that he was at a disadvantage. He always had something positive. He always had a good technique. He always, history, principles. And from that point, I said, it doesn't matter what happens. If this man can overcome all his challenges and become a force in Ishinru, I've got no excuse. And a lot of times when I think about, like, you want to start a new job, or you want to go to this, or you want to start to do that, you get that fear and you get that nervousness, and it takes it back to the dojo, and you say, well, hey, if I can go stands toe to toe with Master Early, knowing I'm about to get my butt kicked, and still do it, if I can go stand with, Master Woods and let him flip me around because I know it's going to hurt, but he's going to, have the courage to say, hey, I want to learn this. If I can have the courage to face these fears in the dojo, I can take that dojo born courage any aspect of my life, whether it be a new job, whether it be a new entertainment thing, whether it be meeting a new lady in your life, or making new friends. The dojo, to me, lays a foundation of courage that it allows you to have that self-confidence, and not just because you can defend yourself, but because that, hey, I'm somebody. The dojo has shown me my training, my martial arts. It's made me aware that I can be a force to be reckoned with in all aspects. It's given me that courage. And I think above all, one of the main things that it teaches, I think teaching people to find that inner courage, that inner strength, is one of the key factors which makes the dojo so important in everyday society. And I think that if there was some way we could take that formula for teaching courage and put it in our schools, we could help with the bullying, because a
Oh,
lot of the
absolutely.
bullying starts because the kids, they may not be getting what they need at home. They may not be getting taught proper self-defense at home. They may not have proper, we don't know what the problem is. They come to school, they want to, feel safe, and they don't, because there's some bully there. If there is a way we could take, let's incorporate the lessons of the dojo into school. Okay, we have gym class. Let's teach courage class. Let's show them, not necessarily teach them self-defense and all that, but teach them how to stand up for yourself, how to accept the fact too that you're not going to win every fight.
No, and honestly, our society over the last generation or two has moved away from that whole, you know, again, just defining courage as moving forward in spite of fear.
Hmm.
You look at some of the activities that our children and like my grandchildren are going into now, whether it be youth sports or even in academia, where you're no longer allowed to you're no longer allowed to criticize somebody for doing bad or award somebody for doing good. um, it takes very little courage to go out and do something where there's absolutely zero consequences, you
Exactly.
know? So there's nothing to be feared. Therefore, everybody's involved, everybody's rewarded equally. And it's very unfortunate because, much like we talked about integrity driving quality, uh, it takes courage to be a person of integrity, right? All of these things weave together like fabric, like a woven fabric. All these attributes that we're going to talk about over the next few weeks, that we talked about in weeks past, they intertwine and become like a very strong rope. Each individual attribute, if you only have one of these attributes, you're not going to be a very good person. You want to instill and cultivate all of these attributes to be complete. So, you know, courage being one of those attributes, if there's no such thing as adversity or there's nothing to fear, then
You become
courage doesn't
stagnant.
exist. We've eliminated it. We've eliminated the necessity for courage completely. And I don't think that's a world I want to live in. Academically, for example, they no longer at the high school in my area have a valedictorian or a salutatorian. They don't rank their students. Nobody gets a number. So they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
My question is, and this is the thing that I have a problem with, same as you. Why is it such a bad thing to have hurt feelings? If you're lacking in any area, as we can attest to this, wives are excellent at telling you what you need to improve on.
Oh yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. I have a problem with participation trophies. I have a problem with that. I do believe that everyone should be acknowledged for coming. Thank you for coming. But I believe the awards should go to the people who have put the effort and have trained and have strived, no matter the discipline, whether it's martial art, music, sports, writing. I believe those who have really put forth the effort should be awarded. Because to me, when I go to a tournament, let's take me and you for example. Our first meeting down at the Renaissance Center, we
Yeah.
both fought hard. You won. You won the trophy. Okay, you got. I think you were the first or second place. I got a little fifth place plaque. Okay, because they said 1 through 5. I didn't feel slighted because I didn't get a big trophy. I felt like, okay, this guy trained hard. He beat me. I got to train harder because if we meet again, it motivates you. Nothing motivates you more than failure. When you fail to do something, you will say, you know what? I'm not letting this happen again. And that to me is a courageous attitude to take. Like you said, you got to have courage to be a man of integrity. It takes a man of integrity or a woman of integrity, a boy or girl of integrity to be able to stand out. We often talk about we're both men of God. We're both Christians. It takes a lot of courage in certain circles to even admit that. When I at work, when I eat lunch, when I go out to dinner, before I eat, I say my grace. And I've often had people look at me and say, "Man, you saying your grace?" I'm like, "Well, why wouldn't I? If you're not ashamed to call God in a time of trouble, why should you be ashamed to say thank you, God, in a time of food? If you're not ashamed to call on the Lord when your life's turning to crap, why should you be ashamed to just say my life's good because of God? And I want to acknowledge that. It takes courage to stand by your convictions, stand by your beliefs. I know you've run into this a lot as a married man. You get around a bunch of single guys, and everybody wants to go to the bar or the strip club or whatever. And you're just like, you know what, dude, I'm married. I don't want to, that's just not me. It takes a man of courage to step away from any situations that could tempt him, that could put him in a bad way, you know? And I don't know. It's like you said, I don't really want to be in a world either where if there's no consequence, there's no reason for me to evolve. And if I don't evolve, then what's the point? What
Right.
is one of my mantras, when I meditate, because I'm a person of extreme anxiety. I'm like off the chart. I've been diagnosed with it. But I do a lot of meditation and I had the courage to seek treatment. One of my mantras, and one of them is moving forward. It's so coincidental that you said that because no matter what the anxiety is, when it flares up, I always try to calm myself down. I try to identify what's causing it and then move forward from it. You've got to have the courage to step out of whatever's got you paralyzed. And it's like you said, courage is not the absence of fear, it's the ability to move in the face of fear. The most courageous, if you talk to some of the veterans who've been in different wars and combat situations, I had a coworker, he's retired Navy SEAL, and we were talking about that, and we were seeing some of the missions. He says, I can't talk about anything I went on because I can tell you there's been times when I've been so scared that I didn't even, I was afraid I was just going to die from just standing where I was at, let alone what I had to go do. And I said, well, how do you get over that? He said, you just realize, you say, I'm training for this. This is what I've been training for. This is what I wanted. Now it's time for me to go do that. It's time for me to prove to myself, this is the man I want to be. And these are the Navy SEALs are considered by many to be the creme de la creme. They're the ultimate warriors. If this ultimate warrior can sit and tell you, man, heck yeah, I'm scared half to death, but I still got to do my job. That's letting you know courage is not something that removes fear. Courage is something that says fear, okay, fear, I know you're there, but I'm going to help you get through that. And to me, that again, taking it back to the dojo, we learn that there, Um, Grandmaster Adams, he made my youngest son, Jacob, he didn't want to compete at the Grand National. He had done a few tournaments and he had won good. And he says, I just don't want to do it. So I talked to him. I said, Sensei, Jacob just doesn't want to compete. Sensei's like, no, he's competing. And he says, but I'll deal with it. He says, because you coming at me as your dad, I'll deal with it. So he casually would talk to him. We talked to him. And so finally, Jacob's like, well, I guess I'll be competing. I said, oh, why are you competing? Well, he said, Sensei told me that he really believes that I can do good. And I don't really want to let him down. So I'm gonna try my best. And so Sensei talked to me. He says, yeah, sometimes with the kids, he says, for Jacob, I wanted him to compete so he can see that everything you're learning, not just so you can go win, so that you can get used to going into these situations. He said, Jake was real quiet. He says, and you don't have to give up yourself, but you can step into any situations and overcome so that if a real situation happens where you're in danger, hey man, look, I faced down this, I faced down this. This is just one more thing to face down. And I really appreciated that. And I really like the subtle way that Sensei does that with so many students and with us as adults too. He gives us things, Master Wood is the same way. I mean, Master Woods was always willing to listen, and he that hand on that ear, and you ask him, well, I think, and he always makes you feel like, okay, I can do this. If it's a new kata and you just can't get it, he always has an anecdote of how we could break it down or how another student or how he had to learn it. And to me, that fosters that courage because you realize that, okay, I'm not alone in this fear. Other people have faced this and have moved on. And that's what I think the dojo shows. It shows that Sensei Ellis was afraid to do this, but he did it. Sensei Ellis wasn't unsure about working with these size. He didn't stop. He got the knowledge and he did it. Sensei Ellis started his own dojo, despite the fact that maybe it wasn't going to be a success, but he did it and he's now a success. And every day he faces that no matter what comes, I'm going to keep moving forward with it. And to me, that shows courage, and our students can pick up from that. If the rest of the world could do it, if our president could stop being a pompous ass and just have the courage to lead us properly, if he has the courage to say, you're not going to agree with me and you're not going to like me, but I am the president and these are the reasons I'm doing this and this is why it's going to happen. If our other leaders would stop, if they had the courage to step back a moment, they had the courage to say, well, maybe my way is not right. What's your idea? If they had the courage to admit that they don't always know what's best, and have the courage actually have a conversation instead of try to prove whose male members are bigger, maybe the world would be a better place, And I hate that we're growing up in a society where everyone, it seems that the only way to get something done is conflict. It's to bang heads. It's to yell. It's to no. Can you have the courage to try a different way? I applaud Colin Kaepernick. I never say his name right now. Apologize. It took courage to kneel down, and I applaud every other athlete, military, police, average citizen who followed that example and kneeled down. It takes courage to do something that you know is going to land you in a pile of you know what. It takes courage to have convictions, you know. You got the people that are filled with hate, they have no problems attacking you. It takes courage for a protester to stand unarmed in front of a wall of police with armed shields and pellet guns and say, hey, this way it's not working and I don't want to take it. It takes courage to do that. And we need to start recognizing and acknowledging the courage these people have and try to emulate that. It takes courage for a man or a woman to stand in front of 20 or 30 crazy misbehaving students and try to share that knowledge. It takes courage for that doctor to pick up that knife and cut you open in the hopes that it's not worse than he thought. You know, it takes courage for you to say, hey, I need to go to the doctor because I got to hear what's going on. There's so many examples of courage in the world that you don't even realize are courage. And just stop and take a moment. And like you said, if we start taking courage and just relegating it to, well, don't worry about it. You don't have anything to fear because there's nothing to fear. You can go here. You're going to get a point anyway. You know, you're going to get a trophy anyway. You know, you can go and do that job. They're going to pay you anyway. Then what's the point of trying to be better? What's the
Yeah.
point of trying to do anything better?
It's almost every episode. I think I've mentioned that the dojo is a microcosm of society. You know, there what goes on in the dojo. You're what I really try to do is make sure my students are exposed to various situations, various pressures, and of course, it's all within the aspects of the martial art. But you know, you can take that template, that typology, and transfer it outside the dojo all the time. You know, that is the foundation of why we're doing what we're doing here. Is, you know, lessons outside the how our training inside the dojo has taken place outside. And there's so many things in that happen. You mentioned tournament competition. Um, for one. And you know, I remember my first experience competing in a tournament was the first tournament I ever competed in was a Lots of Nichols event. There in I think they were. It doesn't matter. Anyway, somewhere on the west side. Um,
Yeah.
but anyway, uh, pretty traumatic. I mean, it was traumatic. It was very anxious. You know, I was very anxious. I didn't win anything that day, but we're a pretty active school as far as competition, and I don't mandate competition to any of my students, but I encourage all of them to compete because in the dojo, you know, you come to a certain comfort level with folks, and when you go to a tournament, you meet a motivated opponent. You know, it's much more uh, realistic than what we might do. Well, I won't say realistic, not in my dojo, because you're going to probably take a beating in my dojo at some point. But in a tournament, um, you know, you meet a motivated opponent who wants that. They want that, you know, medal, or they want that trophy. They want to take that home. So they're going to come at you with the veracity and maybe not as much care as your fellow student does in the dojo. Because again, the atmosphere in the dojo is. I tell my students this all the time. I say, you're either going to be a diamond or you're going to be dust. I'm going to apply the pressure. You know,
Like
so
that.
you
I
know,
like that.
it's a
That's
pressure situation, and tournaments the same way. So there's going to be a lot of pressure, and one of the things that you learn very quickly is that pain isn't fatal. You know, I think people have a big fear of pain, and rightly so. I mean, that's part of your it's part of what God gave you to keep your body, keep you from self-destructing your body. But you know, pain is definitely not fatal, and you need to learn to work and function in the presence of pain at a moderate level.
Right.
You know, when there's a difference between hurt and injured. You know, just because something hurts, that doesn't mean it's time to shut off and shut down. I had an interesting conversation with, I mentioned last week, Professor Sean Chitwood in Columbus. He was the coach of the U.S. team for the ASJL last year. But we were at a tournament a couple years ago in North Carolina, and he teaches a large BJJ academy. Sean's got, or Professor Chitwood, he's got 500 plus students. And they, you know, BJJ, we were just talking about how BJJ in general has flourished. And
As not to interrupt, but for
yeah,
anyone
sure.
who's not
Brazilian
a martial artist,
Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah,
thank you.
sorry, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which, you know, I do not knock Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners at all. They are phenomenal martial artists. But the conversation that Professor Chitwood and I were having were, you know, on a business aspect, and we were just talking about. I said I have a theory that why BJJ is as popular as it is, and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I think people gravitate to the grappling arts, especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because you don't get hit. You know, you get choked, you get armbarred, and you wrestle, but it's in a very controlled manner. You know, and when your partner taps, you release. And, you know, there's just, I'm not saying that it's not exhausting. It's one of the best things that you can do for cardio. You know, grappling is one of it's tough. It is physically demanding, but it is very controlled. Even judo, if you ever done judo, I mean, judo's literally the art of striking someone with the earth. But you know, I've done all these things. I've done judo. I've done, you know, BJJ. I've done some other jujitsu type stuff, but in none of those arts is anybody impacting your body with a punch or a kick, you know, or hitting you in the face. And there's very few feelings like that. You know, there's very few feelings that emulate that sudden transfer of energy and how your body reacts to it. And, you know, I was having this conversation with Professor Chitwood, and he said, "You're absolutely right." And that's how I know how many students he has. Because he said at the time, I believe it was 575 students. He said, "I have 575 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu students." And he said, "I also teach combat jiu-jitsu," which goes back to kind of his roots, where in combat jiu-jitsu, it's a sport jiu-jitsu like we were there doing that day in competition. So it's striking and grappling in combination. He said, "I have 80 students that compete or that train in my combat jiu-jitsu program." He said, "So if that's all I taught, I'd have 80 students."
It's a big difference, and that just
Huge
proves your
difference.
point. It
Huge
proves your
difference. So, you know, in a traditional martial arts dojo where you're teaching a pugilistic art, a striking art, you know, I that one of the things I tell my students all the time is that, you know, like I mentioned earlier, pain is not fatal. It's okay to hurt, but you need to understand that when that occurs, you've got to condition your mind and your body how to react. You know, that's that building of courage, or that realization that discomfort in a lot of different ways. This is one of those times when you can take the lesson of the dojo as a typology and apply it outside. Discomfort isn't fatal. You know, when you feel discomfort, that's when you need your mind to start focusing. You know, you need your vision to narrow on that thing that's causing the discomfort. You need to control what you can control. Breath is a good example. You know, I always tell my students, when you start to feel uncomfortable, you know, take a step back, Focus on the things you can control, like your breath. Breathe in, breathe out. Now, get your mind right, get back in and do what's got to be done. It's funny you bring up the whole thing of, Kaepernick and the sociology of all that. I'm not a fan of Colin Kaepernick. I do agree with you that it was a somewhat courageous stance. He did have some things that he put on the line there. I just wish he would have chose a different venue, perhaps. We started this whole episode with thanking our veterans and our service members, and I think America is just a great country in general. If it wasn't, we wouldn't have so many freaking people trying to get here, right? This is where everybody wants to be. And we do acknowledge everybody's ideas. But I think there's certain things that, regardless of your ideology, I won't call them sacred, but there's certain ideas that we should hold true to, or certain things that we shouldn't disrespect. I'll call it that. We shouldn't disrespect our flag. We shouldn't disrespect our national anthem. Now, you take a professional athlete, he's entitled to his opinions and he's entitled to his beliefs. And this is where I'm coming from. Until you put on a uniform, because you're a paid player. If it's not the ideology of the team, now you're taking your ideology and imposing that on everybody else that wears that uniform. So I think whatever you want to do off the court, and these guys are famous. They have a platform. But for me, it's not fair that I take my views, whatever that may be, into my job place. You're the same way. Regardless of your ideology, you say we agree that we are Christian, but you work in a very diverse environment. So do I, where there's, I work with a lot of Japanese. I've said that in the past. There's Christianity is not huge in Japan. So I know you work with a large Muslim contingency and, several other religions, probably some Hindu folks. And
it's probably some Satanism, the way some of these people act in this plan. I'm not going to lie
to you.
I
guarantee it. As a matter of fact, I know that in the past I've worked, I've got several guys that work for me that are atheists. But when I'm at work, I need to put the company values first and that second. I can share my values, but I can't. So in the case of Colin Kaepernick, I'm just saying, I definitely agree for him to take that stand, took some courage. However, I think the way he went about it was poor. And on the hand of Nike, here's where I'm at with Nike. You ain't getting no more of my money. I ain't throwing my Nike stuff away, but I ain't buying no more either. Because to me, I think they're just using him as a tool. I think they used him as a tool and his platform. And he did too. He saw an opportunity to get paid. So I think courage, although it took courage to start it, I believe it kind of came to be an economic advantage for him after a while. I don't know how much courage or how much that it took, and like, again, this whole NBA thing with Black Lives Matter.
We can go on and on about that.
Yeah, and I don't want to
interject the interesting thought on that when you say that in terms of Copernic, and I agree. People they're imposing their things, but here's my question, and what he did sparked the movement, it sparked the conversation. Would it have been as effective if he was just at a club somewhere and decided to kneel, or had he not been in that jersey? And to that point, I'm saying I think what he did was the right thing to do, because he did it in that venue at that moment. It made everyone stop and notice. It made everyone stop and say, well, wait a minute, why is he doing this? It made people who hate the movement, who are true racists, It showed their true colors. They came out in force, in vocal force. It identified a lot of animosity. It showed people who are tired of being pushed around or being treated as second citizens. It made us stand up and say, you know what? You are absolutely right. We're sick of this mess. I'm a black man making you millions, but yet I'm still going to be treated like a second class citizen. I'm not going to start anything violent, but I'm going to do something that shows that I'm fed up. I am a puppet, even though I'm also manipulating my own strings at times. So we'll agree to disagree. I feel that that showed that in that moment, it was the same way with, and this makes me angry because I know this man's name, but I always forget names, in the Olympics when he put the hand up with the
Jesse
black glove.
Owens, right?
No,
Was
not
it
Jesse Owens.
not Jesse Owens?
Not Jesse Owens. He showed Hitler a thing or two. But I
Yeah.
mean, in the
Okay.
60s, the two athletes, there were three athletes.
I know I've seen the photo of
Yeah,
what.
and and oh, I cannot. I really feel horrible because I'm forgetting his name. This is terrible. Please, Black America, if you're listening, please forgive me for forgetting one of our heroes' names. But I watched an interview, and he said, "Here I am, black man, about to receive this medal. What can I do to support my country, but at the same time uplift my people?" And he said, "I'm putting my hand up to God," and that's what he did. He put on a black glove and he put his hand up to God. Everyone took it as a symbol of black superiority, blah blah blah. He was stripped of his medals. There was a white man stood with them. He was the bronze. He did the same thing. They stripped him because he understood what they were trying to accomplish. That sparked such an outrage. It again opened up a dialogue for the show. This is a great country. Yeah, it's all wonderful. You know, an apple pie looks great on the top until you take the pan off and realize that you left it in the oven a little bit and it was burnt. You got to expose it. Sometimes, if you want to expose a wound, you got to rip that bandage off. These dramatic occurrences, they're ripping it off. America is a great country. Everyone's trying to get here. Then once they get here, what do? We got to figure out how to let people come. If we're the greatest country, we got to figure out how to maintain that being greatest country. And sometimes it takes dramatic instances. Sometimes you've got to use what's available to do what you got to do. And so to me, like I said, we'll agree to disagree on that one in
Yeah.
terms of the venue. But I do believe it sparked, and of course, motivation behind that. There's going to be a monetary motivation. Everyone is motivated. At some point, you're motivated by the money. Let's just face it. We're here to make money so we can have a better lives for our families and ourselves. But I do believe in some instances, you have to look at the situation, look at your options, look at the impact each option will have, and you've got to go with the one that will get your point across. Often what's going to be, is this going to be the most dangerous for me, or is this going to be not the most dangerous? A lot of the politicians, when they come and they're speaking, to me, even like I said, you know how I feel about Trump, but any president, when he gets up in public, to me, any president who gets up in public is courageous because you got all these crazy fools around here. And let's just face it, the Secret Service is great, but you have some very, very skilled gun enthusiasts. You have some very, very skilled non-military marksmen. I mean, let's take a point.
Yeah.
They tried to plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan, my governor. I mean, honestly, so you've got some highly motivated, highly skilled, and even if they're not highly trained, they're highly able to get weapons. Anytime anyone steps into the foreground to put forth their idea, I think that takes a lot of courage. I think you got to look at, okay, what's the best way for me to get my point across that's going to cause the least amount of damage, but have the biggest impact? And I think in a lot of situations, if you look through history, a lot of historical events have been because of that. They've been like, well, that might have been the right time to do it, but he did it. I'm gonna give you a personal example. When I was on my first jobs, I was working with at Man O Man. There's a store in Northland Mall, and I had been there maybe a month or two. And I came to work one morning, and there were three owners. And when I came to work, two of the owners were there, and I was like, "Oh, what's going on?" They said, "Oh, some things are about to happen." They fired the entire store, the manager, the assistant, three or four salesmen. They fired every, including the stock person, except for me. And I'm like, "What's going on?" They said, "We found out that there's been some thieving going on, and we realized how it's been happening, and blah 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 blah." And I'm like, "What?" Now, I knew there were some things going on, but I didn't involve myself in it. I would just say, hey, we shouldn't be doing that, or I don't. You sure that's okay, or that you should get that guy that discount. You know, I didn't say, you know, and they told me, said we watched you too, and you're honest, so you're saying. Now at that moment, I'm like, wow, and I said to myself, well, this may not be the right time, but I'm going to do this. I went up to the boss and I said, well, I'm glad you think I'm honest, but as long as we're talking of me being honest, you think I could have a raise? Because I'm still kind of the low man on the totem pole. And he looked at me, he says, you're seriously asking for a raise when I just fired the entire store? I said, I got nothing to lose. He says, I like that. He said, it took nerve to do that. So yeah, we're gonna bump your pay. So I got a raise. So again, maybe that wasn't the right time because I was exploiting, because at that moment I knew in the back of my mind, he's not going to fire me because I'm really the only one still working here. So they need me here. So I'm going to take advantage. So maybe that wasn't the proper venue to do that. Maybe I should have waited and then said, okay, I'd like to talk to you later. But sometimes you just got to rip the band-aid off and you got to say, this is the moment, this is what I got to do. And boom, there it is. So I think it all comes down to the moment, the situation, and doing what you feel is right to do the situation. And that's what I love about America, is that we can agree to disagree.
Yeah.
That's great, because I do have to say your points have made me think like, I can totally see your point on that. But again, I think it depends on the situation and the individual, and will you have the courage to do what's necessary when it's time for it to be necessary. And
Yeah.
again, it goes back to the dojo. Like you said, it's one thing to, because I've never done Brazilian jiu-jitsu and I've never done judo, but I have done wrestling. I've done a
Yeah.
lot of wrestling,
Same thing.
and it
And
is physically exhausting, but I never felt any, I
you
never
didn't
felt
get
any
that white
danger.
light,
Yeah, I never felt
you
that,
know.
when you
Yeah.
step in front of somebody like you or Master Phillips or Master Maidman, and that punches corn, Master George, you you get real real quick. It gets real real quick. You got to have that courage. There's like, if I don't do what I was taught to do, I am going to get hit, and it adds a whole nother layer. Just like in basketball and football, these big guys are charging at you with this ball bouncing. I got to stop him from shooting this. Oh man, these big armored guys are charged at you. I got to step back and throw this. I got to catch this and avoid them. That is imminent danger. It takes a lot of courage to step up and do that. And I do think that, again, taking it back to what you're saying, I understand the reason behind making everyone feel that they have accomplished something, making everyone feel, it's good to be a participant. I understand the logic behind it. But if you take it too far, you erode the very foundation of what sports are supposedly about, to teach you how to achieve something greater, how to go for something, how to strive for something, how to accomplish something, how to give you that sense like, I won this because I trained for the last 3 months and busted my head on this bag and busted my arms on this bag. That's why I won this. As opposed to, well, I didn't really train. I was a little lazy, but it's okay because I still got this trophy that says thanks for showing up.
Yeah.
I got a problem with that. I do
Yeah.
think, it's okay if you give a kid a ribbon and say, hey, because you came, you have the courage to actually come. Thank you. But when we step it up, there needs to be a differential. You need to push the fact that if you do something and if you achieve something, we will reward you for it. If you don't want to do anything and you want to be lackluster, we're not going to reward you for it. We're not, because we don't want you to stay that way. We want you to elevate yourself. And I don't think it's a bad thing to tell a child, a man, a woman, grown or whatever, that I'm sorry, you're not doing that great. You've got to improve a little bit. If you're willing to show them how they can improve. Now, criticism just for criticism's sake, no, I can't stand that. One of the things at the dojo, what I really love is the masters we had at first at Davidson for me and then at Southfield, they will tell you in a minute where you're messing up. And then they will show you in a minute where you're messing up. And then they will quickly teach you how not to mess up. You know, they will show you. Master Early would always blast with that back fist. And then he would say, now, what you got to do, if you want to avoid this back fist, you got to start thinking in terms of this so that it doesn't happen. Master Woods would always tell you, okay, This right here, this looking a little sloppy. So now what you thinking in my mind, blah, blah, because so that you can, Master Adams, always, hold on, because I know you've been subjected to this. Wait, stop. What are you doing?
Yeah.
No. I love when he does it. No, okay, let's do this right. And then in painstakingly will show you. So criticism for criticism's sake is wrong, but criticism, constructive criticism, that's
That's
necessary. That's how we grow.
exactly,
It takes
exactly.
courage
And
to criticize somebody too. I do believe it takes courage. Like for you, as know as a teacher, these are your students. They're monetarily they're paying the bills. It takes courage for you to tell a student, you know what, you're just not getting this right. You got to do better. I'm pretty sure you've had to talk to parents about students' behaviors and stuff. It took courage for you to tell your listen. I'm going to tell you something you don't want to hear because potentially that source of income can leave, but you
yeah,
knew by your as a man of integrity and a man of accountability, it was your job to let this person know that they could do better, and you had the courage to do it. So all of that, like you said, it's one big weaving rope that you're just, it's like you when you said before, I loved it when you says karate is the framework in which we drape life on. I love when you said that, and it's all wrapping it up. You know, I think that's so. My
inverse.
question,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, go. Well, we're talking about properly rewarding people for their efforts and having courage to step in. The inverse of that is also true in the fact that when somebody does um, do well, we should encourage and make sure that the reward goes to the proper person.
mm-hmm.
Um, I was listening to an interview this week. I believe it was Roy Jones Jr. Right, he's about to do a bout with Mike Tyson. Right, they're going to do a they're going to do an exhibition bout. That'll be one heck of an exhibition. I'm going to be watching. But he was an Olympic athlete and got a silver medal after overwhelmingly winning the bout. Even the man that he beat, he was in the Olympics in Korea, South Korea, and the gold was given to a Korean athlete, and he received silver over. It wasn't even a question who won the fight.
Right,
And he talked to the athlete after, and it was an interesting interview. And he said, I asked the guy, "Do you think you won?" And he said, "No." He said, "I
he was
don't."
honest.
Yeah, he was honest, which was courageous on the part of the athlete to admit it. But Roy Jones Jr. said it's a good thing he said that because if he had said it otherwise, he's about to get another beat down. But but it takes courage. Again, just backing up to what we talked about last week. You cannot be a person of integrity without courage. So you're that it is fundamental. It needs to be one of those attributes that you cultivate within yourself fundamentally, because very, very few of us are ever going to have that moment in our life where we do that over the top, courageous act
Mm-hmm.
like we all are, I believe, what flight 90 was it flight 97 that went down in Philadelphia or whatever. And the gentleman on that flight that just, let's roll,
Right,
he gathered the folks together and they stormed the cockpit. I'm glad that, that's not an opportunity that everybody has to face. Or, we have the people that were in the towers during 9/11 that stood with fire on one side and 100 stories below them on the other,
right,
and had to get the courage to jump
right.
or burn alive. Or all of the men and women who were first responders who showed courage in rushing to that situation or
Yeah.
whatever that situation may be on a daily basis. If you're a firefighter, a police officer, or an EMT, you know, the
They never
the
know what they're
percentage of
going
the
to step into.
population, yeah, the percentage of the population that are in those jobs, the soldiers that we talked about earlier, is very small. However, we all have opportunities to show courage on a daily basis. We can show courage in the decisions that we make every day. We're family men, we're husbands, we're fathers. We are, it takes courage to get up every day, put on those work shoes, and go to your job.
Mm-hmm.
It does take courage because there is an alternative. Unfortunately, in our society, there is methods to take advantage of the system, but it takes courage to want to do that. It takes courage to come back home every day and face that mess. Sometimes it would be easier to turn right instead of turn left and go home. Because there's crazy waiting when you get there. You
And
got
it hits you
kids.
right at the door.
Life demands you to make courageous decisions every day,
Mhm.
every day, and they're going to be small, but they're going to be accumulative. And how you decide, the decisions that you make on those daily basis, those very small choices that you have to make every day between what is right and what is wrong, is what's going to really make up the type of person you're ultimately going to become. It's always going to be, and I give my friend Derek Baker credit for this. Um, we're rarely going to be able to, as I said, uh, Derek is the evangelist at the church that I go to, and we worked together for about 18, 19 years, and he's actually the guy that led me to Christ, but ultimately, the decisions that you make over the quality of the decisions that you make, it's always going to be quality over quantity per se.
It should
You want to make the best quality decision and have the courage to do so. Um, if you're a young child in a school situation, this being anti-bullying month, you know, we always we've all come up through the system where there's this whole social pecking order and cliques and this and that. But if you see that kid that is being pushed out by the social norm, have the courage to go up and talk to that person. That's not a life and death situation. However, it still takes courage for you to buck the system
Mhm.
and open yourself up to have that conversation with somebody that everybody else is saying, you know, they're not worthy. I think Sensei Shudi, you mentioned him earlier, and the fact that he has had physical limitations. Unfortunately, he's passed on now, but I agree with you 100%. I can't imagine the amount of courage it took for somebody in with his limitations to start the journey that he did. That's incredible.
One thing I like what you just said, and this is something we should point out. We hear the word courage, and it always invokes images of brave warriors or whatever. We inflate the word. I think a key way to try to promote courage is to take the power out of that actual word and let's shrink it down. It's like you said. I love when you just said have the courage to do little bitty things in life. Courage is a very small thing that leads to bigger things. And I think don't we shouldn't I don't know how to say this, but the word courage, the word itself is intimidating.
Yeah,
We need to take some of the intimidation out of it and just realize that courage is not something that none of us can achieve or none of us have, or it has to be a huge thing. You show, like you said, you show courage every day. With it being anti-bullying month, if you see someone being pushed or being bullied, if you go, maybe you don't have, maybe you don't want to step in front where the punishment is happening, but you can go to the side and say, hey man, I see you going, maybe we can go to the teacher together, or maybe we can get some more friends. Have the courage to at least attempt to help the person. I'm not saying go out and get your butt kicked because this guy's getting beat down and you jumped in. No, I'm saying have the courage to find a way to support this person to help bring about the change. And I think it's those little bitty things, like you said. that really, really make the big, big difference. And because I had to do this because I felt bad, I wanted to Google. So if anyone is interested in the Olympic event I was talking about, it was the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City. And it was Tommy Smith and John Carlos. Those are the two athletes who raised, they were both black athletes, gold and silver, who raised their fist up with the black glove, and it sparked. So if you wanted to check that out, it's the 1968 Mexico Olympics in Mexico City. But I just I guess the whole point that we're trying to make here, Sensei Ellis and myself, is we don't want you to think we're martial artists. We've trained hard. We've taken the beatings. We've done this. We've done exceptional things. We've done not so great things. We don't want you to think we're any different than you are, who's ever listening. We're nothing special. We're just two men who believed we could better ourselves, and we found a way to do that. And we continue to do that. And we want everyone to do that. So don't think that because Sensei Ellis he has his own school, he's an engineer, he's this and that. He's not a mythical man. He's a man who chose to walk a path of integrity, accountability, have respect, and have courage to continue forward. Don't think that Sensei Gulley is because, you know, I'm in the plant for 20 something years. You know, I've got a YouTube channel, I've got books published, I've got music published. Don't think I'm some phenom. I'm just a guy who wanted to do something. I had the integrity to hold my head up. I respected the system and the process for which I lived, and I had the courage to try to change it. And I had to, you know, accountability to accept when I've made mistakes and try to correct that. We are everyday people who are trying to live extraordinary lives, and it takes courage to do that. So anyone listening to this, we want to encourage you to find that little bit of modicum of courage in yourself, to act with integrity, to respect those around you who could help you, to be accountable for your actions and be courageous in what you're doing. Any little thing you do, it takes courage now with COVID. It takes courage to walk out of the door because the news, we don't know what's going on. 1 minute the numbers are up, next minute the numbers are down. It takes courage to walk into a grocery store to buy food to survive because you got to mask up, glove up, everything. So every day, every little acts like that, you're showing courage, whether you realize it or not. We're just trying to do this. So we want people to realize that stuff we've learned, these are not like Master Adams and Master Woods always say, this ain't no secret on the mountaintop. You don't have to go up to the Shaolin Temple on the mountaintop. These are everyday lessons that everyone can learn and put to their advantage. We want everyone listening to please have courage in your life. Be courageous about what you want to do. You know, go ahead and strive to be better. Help those who are not as fortunate as you. Have the courage to accept the fact that this is not right and I can do something. If you can do something, have the courage to do it. You know?
I found an interesting clip, like it's from an article, but I really liked the way they broke this down. Again, I think you said it very well. There's very few people who will have the opportunity to be truly extraordinary. You know, I find there's so many examples of people we know who are just everyday people and have done exceptional or extraordinary things, uh, just simply through sheer will and hard work. People that I, respect highly. And again, not to be rude or disrespectful, I know there's problems in our country, but it really befuddles me when people want to take um, the minorities and try to make them, you know, out to be. I don't want to use the word victims or less or whatever. I just know so many people who are minorities that are so successful, and I don't think that they're, extraordinary. I'm sorry. I don't think Barack Obama is extraordinary in the fact that he has some ability beyond what every other human being has. I don't think Michael Jordan is extraordinary because he had some kind of extraordinary ability that no other human being had. I don't think, you know, whomever we're talking about had something extraordinary. I think these are all ordinary people who had drive, and work ethic, and went beyond what makes them, unfortunately, compared to the rest of society, they are extraordinary. But even within our circle, we talk about, Master Adams a lot. We to accomplish what he accomplished in the time that he accomplished it,
Mhm.
was phenomenal. It was extraordinary, especially during that time period. Him being, a black athlete or black martial artist that came up through the 50s and the 60s, and, nationally, to do the national circuit. And I've heard him tell stories of going to, tournaments in the South where, he'd go into places where he wasn't welcome. So again, I think every day, again, we're dealing with humanity on a daily basis. People like yourself, Fred, just so many examples of people who wrote. To me, one of the best examples of black heroes like Rosa Parks. I mean, come on, that lady changed the world by not taking a back seat. Tremendous amount of courage in that decision. I'd really like to see more of that, because I think it resonates with people like me more than maybe Colin Kaepernick's example, or LeBron James. I'm sorry, but
No, people
anyway,
who
I
have
want
the
to.
most to lose really doing, because Rosa Parks at that
Exactly,
moment could have been
exactly.
arrested, beaten. They could have
Yeah,
done whatever she wants. She was a black woman at that time, and
there's a
that this the resolve. And I think that courage was just born out of frustration. You know,
Yep, there's an excellent verse in the Bible, and I'm going to paraphrase, but Jesus and the disciples are watching people give their money to the temple,
Mhm.
right? And the Pharisees all come up and drop in large amounts of money. And a widow comes up and drops in a coin. And he asks the disciples, who gave more? And they said, of course, their response was the Pharisees. And he says, no, no, the widow gave more because she gave it all.
Mhm.
Although the amount wasn't the same, it was all that she had to give. I mean, that's courageous. That's faith, right? So that takes a tremendous amount of courage and faith. So that's why, just again, excuse me, talking too much, getting dry here, but um, everyday courage. I think this little snippet that I found breaks it down really well, and it breaks it into 4 categories of moral courage, which is standing up and acting when injustices occur. For example, human rights are violated or when persons are treated unfairly. I think we've touched on that today.
Mhm.
And, those are opportunities when everyday people can show courage. We have disciplined courage, where it says remaining steadfast, strategic, and deliberate in the face of inevitable setbacks and failures for the greater good. I think we've touched on that.
Definitely.
Um, intellectual courage, challenging old, ex- challenging old assumptions and acting to make change based on new learnings, understanding and insight gleaned from experience and or educational research.
We definitely nailed that one to the wall today.
Yeah, absolutely. Even, the Ishinru system that we study stood in the face of what was deemed to be normal. Shimabuku was scorned by Soke Shimabuku was scorned by his peers for stepping out and doing something different. And I think, yeah, we've definitely touched on that. And then empathetic courage, which I think this one is why we're doing what we're doing, but acknowledging personal bias and intentionally moving away from them in order to vicariously experience the trials and triumphs of others. Well, I'm not trying to vicariously experience any triumphs and trials, but I think one of the whole purposes we're doing this is to just show that as Americans and as human beings, we have more in common than we have differently. Our medium just happens to be martial art.
True. Bottom line, if you peel back the skin, the culture, traditions, we all have red blood, we all have white bones.
Yep.
That's the
We're all
framework.
built of the same materials.
Exactly. Exactly.
But we're a little over 90 minutes in, so probably a good place to end on.
As always, we thank you for listening. And which has become our custom to do, Sensei Ellis, give us one final thought to take us home today.
Again, like I mentioned in the beginning with my students, what I always encourage them to do is simply move forward, regardless of the circumstances. Be forward minded. It doesn't have to be a mile, it doesn't have to be half mile. Life is a journey that we take one step at a time. And each step requires courage if it's going to be a step in the right direction. So, again, each week I've challenged you to look inside and reflect on the topic. So, this week, I just challenge everybody to try to make the courageous decisions as they go throughout their daily life. It doesn't take courage to go with the norm. Are you doing right? Whatever that situation is, that's going to make all the difference in the world. Have the courage to do what is right.
Amen to that. And on that note, this is Sensei Gulley saying, have a good week. See you next time.
Sensei Ellis signing out as well. Have a good week.